Synonyms! They're a fun way to say the same thing over and over again. If I didn't have deplorable, reprehensible, and detestable, how else would I describe Donkey Kong? I've been looking for a new hobby. How about synonyms? Let's try it out. If you look up the synonym for trash, you get exactly what you'd expect. Konami! The only people up to the task of making Frogger the Great Quest, and it turns out not much else. Once a titan of the 80s and 90s video game scene, heck, even the early 2000s, Konami has fallen off considerably when it comes to both public opinion and games developed. Konami was too big to fail at a point, pumping out new Castlevanias, Metal Gears, Contras, alongside great licensed games like Turtles in Time and great original games like Sword of Etheria. However, there was a time in the mid-2000s into early 2010s where they just stopped. Every series that Konami had a major hand in seemed to wither off and die in all sorts of different ways. Castlevania tried to ape what other successful franchises like God of War had achieved. Phantom Pain had such a horrible development cycle, it finally got Kojima to dump the company. Series like Contra and Bomberman were missing in action. If there was an up, they'd fuck it. When it comes to franchises Konami messed up royally though, none come close to Silent Hill. Overselling Silent Hill's importance to the horror genre is impossible. Right next to Resident Evil and Alone in the Dark, modern horror game tropes started in the small town of Silent Hill, Maine. Where Resident Evil made its threats knowable and able to be defeated, Silent Hill went deeper, telling a story of personal grief and pain personified by a town with eldritch horrors, cult members, and a dark alternate reality. While Resident Evil went for more big-budget horror, Silent Hill went psychological, breaking down the player bit by bit with tragedy upon tragedy until soon they couldn't take any more. Resident Evil built up to one big climactic scary moment that would kill you in the moment. Meanwhile, Silent Hill built up to something far more disturbing, the sort of thing that kept you up at night. The first game on the PlayStation was a hit, and introduced a lot of people to this more cerebral type of horror that would pave the way for the definitive horror game, Silent Hill 2. Time's been passing. Beards are proof of that, and in that time, hundreds upon thousands of horror games have been released, some reaching huge levels of critical acclaim, like Until Dawn, Outlast, Alien Isolation, and Dead Space. But even with all those games, and over 20 years of time, Silent Hill 2 still sits firmly at the top of so many greatest horror games lists. Silent Hill 2 did everything that it could perfectly. Sure, the combat is fun, but with an atmosphere like this, following characters like this, in a town as cruel and oppressive yet still faint and distant like this, it just doesn't really matter. Time passes and people still talk about Silent Hill 2, discussing its themes, its messages, how it uses subtlety to tell a story it seemed like no one else had ever tried to tell in a video game. If we named these games like we name every other genre, we'd abandon horror and call them Silent Hills-likes. That left whatever game would eventually be burdened with the tag of the sequel to Silent Hill 2 to fill shoes that seemed nearly impossible to fill. And Silent Hill 3 actually did a pretty good job. Yeah, there's a reason these ones got a horrible port years later, speeding off and flipping the double bird as they left Silent Hill 4 in the dust. Silent Hill 1 sitting in the back, confident in the knowledge they'd never even considered letting him on the bus. Is that mean to Silent Hill 4? Someone will have to play Silent Hill 4 to prove me wrong. After that, though, the series would take its biggest hit yet, with Team Silent, the development team since the first game, breaking up. The team were dissolved and eventually absorbed back into Konami, but in name only. The key figures that made the team what it was were scattered all across the industry. Silent Hill creator Keiichiro Toyama would leave Konami in 1999, not even having a hand in Silent Hill 2's creation, and would go on to make Gravity Rush and Siren. Masashi Tsuboyama, who directed 2 and did art direction on 4, would leave in 2005 to join Goodfeel and work on games like Yoshi's Woolly World. What skills transferred? Sound director Akira Yamaoka, writer Hiroyuki Iwaku, artist Masahiro Ito, all either gone or would be in limited to tertiary roles in Ito's case. He's too busy dealing with Silent Hill fans, which may as well be a full-time job. So the team who had made the first 4 games pretty much didn't exist anymore. That meant that Silent Hill was kinda stuck. What would the series become without a solid driving force behind it? What does milk become if you leave it out in the sun for too long? Silent Hill entered an embarrassing downward spiral, where what was once the bastion of horror games became a laughingstock. Not all of that is Silent Hill or even Konami's fault, though. The mid to late 2000s were just a terrible time to be a horror game. Their old butt buddies Resident Evil found their biggest success with even more bombastic action set pieces in Resident Evil 4, and suddenly the entire industry shifted. Horror games looked less like Clock Tower and Sweet Home, and started looking more like a man punching a boulder to death and giant devil dinosaurs. There were brief flashes of something good like Dead Space, but then Isaac Clarke starts taking off his helmet and it only gets worse from there. These shifting tides would also affect Silent Hill, though not as fast as many people might assume, as Silent Hill Origins by Climax Studios actually pretty good. I saw this game and thought, wow, these guys have definitely drawn SpongeBob porn. It's not a patch on the original 3, but it can dust it up with 4 for table scraps. Sitting up at the table with the big boys, though, is Silent Hill Shattered Memories, also from Climax. Released originally on the Wii before everybody stopped laughing and they put it on the PlayStation 2 in 2010, Shattered Memories was a remake of the original Silent Hill 1 in most aspects. It's one of those remakes that changes a whole load of stuff that didn't work in the original, and when said original looks like this, yeah, might need a tune-up or 2. What makes it especially special is how it uses the psychological aspect of Silent Hill, going full meta and profiling the player throughout the game to get a better read on you as a person and tailor the experience to what you find scary. It does this in standard ways, like actually giving you a psych profile to fill out. I'd rather keep my sexual preferences well out of the reach of Silent Hill, thank you, and in more inventive ways, like having you color in this picture, then the house in the next scene is the house you drew. I made The Simpsons. Even with a door-opening animation too funny for its own good, Shattered Memories is still a really effective horror game, and when I talk about the failings of modern Silent Hill, know that Shattered Memories is an exception to that rule. Well, it sure is a good thing roller coasters only go up! The good times, though, were never gonna last, and whatever adrenaline rush let Climax pump out Shattered Memories had worn off. Despite proving they could make something comparable to the old team's work and still make it unique, Climax would never work on another Silent Hill game, and instead the franchise would hop around from studio to studio, the first one to catch the hot potato being Double Helix Games with Silent Hill Homecoming. Yeah, this came out between Origins and Shattered Memories, but pipe down, we gotta talk about Alex! This is the first American-made Silent Hill game, and I don't want to say you can tell, but it's not hard to notice. The game breaks a lot of Silent Hill traditions without really replacing them with anything interesting. And what they did put in the game just isn't very good. The nurses and Pyramid Head are back! You know those were about James's sexual frustrations, right? So is James just cranking it in a closet somewhere and Pyramid Head's trying to find him so he can kick him out? It reeks of not really understanding what the original games were trying to say by just dragging and dropping in iconic monsters that don't make any sense to be here. And that's not a Double Helix problem, that's a Konami problem. Whenever they're making one of their terrible Silent Hill movies, they make sure to drag Pyramid Head out of retirement so he can do the press circuit. Masahiro Ito is a really big fan of this. The main character is a soldier who just got discharged from the military, which is prime material for an all-timer Silent Hill story. But all it means is that the game has more justification to add combat-focused things, like dodge rolls and enemies with big glowing weak spots. There are also more human characters here than in any other game, and it makes the whole experience a lot less scary. In the older games, you'd meet someone and they'd be whispering about gods and demons, and you'd think, God, I'm glad I'm the only sane person in Silent Hill. Isn't that right, Mary? Mary. Here you meet multiple people you can have a calm, completely normal conversation with, and it breaks the old tension the games had, where not even other people were trustable. There's no "they look like monsters to you" guy, and he was so effective he killed all discussion about Silent Hill. It's not incompetent, like if this were a completely different game not called Silent Hill, it'd be fine, a little forgettable, but the name Silent Hill brings expectations with it, and they're ones this game just completely fails at delivering on. But the bad times were only starting for Silent Hill, as it was about to enter the most embarrassing stretch of all, March 2012. I've been meaning to call the Calendar Factory to try to get March off the menu. I piss myself every time I see what February's hiding. Konami wanted to pack this March fit to burst with content for Silent Hill fans. This was all launched because of Silent Hill Revelations 3D, the next Silent Hill movie whose release date was set in stone by the movie studio. That meant if they wanted to capitalize on all that buzz created by the movie, play along, all their content would have to come out in this window. Every week you'd get a new Silent Hill thing on the docket. A new movie, a new mainline entry, a remake of the PS2 games that anybody wanted remakes of, and a spin-off on the PlayStation Vita. PlayStation Vita was not the biggest failure in that last sentence. This would become Downpour, the HD Collection, and Book of Memories. Now, the HD Collection we can skim over. I've mentioned it before. All you really need to know is that Hijinks Studios, the Redkin 5th Avenue NYC presents Busy Scissors guys, were forced to remake Silent Hills 2 and 3 from nothing, cause Konami mistook the source code for the original games for ants. Ah! Downpour and Book of Memories are similarly easy to explain. Downpour would be developed by Vatra Games, who don't even have a second game to make fun of. Konami, though, found the fledgling Czech developer and thought, these guys will work for cheap. Vatra was completely unprepared for a task this big, and cracks formed all over the place. The development staff didn't like that the main character would be a criminal, Akira Yamaoka had left and wouldn't be returning for the music, the band Korn saw the opening and thought yum 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 yum, it was looking bad. Game finally comes out and reviews rather poorly. Movie drops, much the same. HD collection flops and the world's most depressing pachinko machine just hit a bingo. But what about Book of Memories? Well, the dungeon crawler looter was so far behind schedule, it was pushed all the way back 6 months to the completely inappropriate month of October. Releasing one bum Silent Hill game alone was bad. Alongside a movie was even worse. But then, making the most readily available versions of the most beloved games, 2 and 3, the worst versions they could have been, spelt doom. Silent Hill's reputation was mud at this point after so many high-profile flops, and the series would go dormant for another 2 years. And then, it woke up. PT dropped out of nowhere in 2014 and shocked the world. A world-class horror game came out of nowhere with zero explanation, with graphics that were out of this world, an eerie and effective gameplay loop, and scares that lasted with people well after the game ended. Those who saw it through to the end learned that this was the next entry in Silent Hill, with Metal Gear's Hideo Kojima and Pan's Labyrinth director Guillermo del Toro helming the project, starring Walking Dead megastar Norman Reedus. This was a surefire hit. No way they could mess this up, and out the door with you, Kojima, you weird bastard! The 2014 saga of Konami ousting Kojima from the company and ripping Metal Gear Solid 5 from him was the last straw for a lot of people when it came to the company, since it had managed to kill two franchises at the same time. The person in charge of Metal Gear and Silent Hill was now gone. And it wasn't long after this, Konami ceased console development altogether, choosing to spend more time with their gambling problems. And so, for the next decade, Konami would ride off into the sunset, only pulling over occasionally to make a Metal Gear survive on the side of the road. Until 2022, when Konami pulled into the driveway, kicked down the door, and just poured itself a drink like that carton of milk didn't have its picture on the side. And when we asked what it was doing, it just started announcing tons more games out of nowhere. Yeah, we're making new Bomberman and Contra games, tons more Castlevania crap. We started remaking Snake Eater. Say, are you out of eggs? The Silent Hill announcements, though, were by far the most shocking part. A remake of Silent Hill 2, a pair of new games called Silent Hill Townfall and Silent Hill F, just fill in whatever funny F word you want there, and skateboard decks. But alongside those games would be announced something brand new, wholly original and never before tried. An innovative style of content that mixed pre-made cutscenes with live responses from fans watching all over the world. This is Silent Hill Ascension. And it's the worst thing to ever happen to Silent Hill, and I'm including the town! Ascension is a dizzying display of everything that could have gone wrong with a project. It's difficult to find a single thing to enjoy about it. The only thing harder is describing what it actually is. Okay, so how do you play Silent Hill Ascension? There's your first mistake. So Silent Hill Ascension isn't a game in the traditional sense. It plays with your emotions by parading the corpse of a beloved franchise around, but that's not really a game. So how Ascension works is that every weekday you either log on to the Ascension website or open the Ascension app on your phone to watch a piece of content. The piece of content is broadcast live to everybody watching at once, like a live stream. While you're watching, you can chat with other watchers and send them Silent Hill-themed emojis. That's up there with "Where's this grenade's pin?" as 4 words I never want to hear. When the show does start, you can watch along, obviously, but there will be key points during the broadcast where a character needs to make a decision. Then 3 prompts will pop up. Either a redemption choice, a suffering one, or a damnation one. Then you can vote on which one you want, and by the time of the next broadcast, or whenever the poll closes, the choice that wins will be set in stone and become the canon of the show. Then at the end of every day, a character will be picked at random to go to the dark side, where the community watching has to work together to beat QuickTime events to help the character escape. You tap, swipe, and hold buttons until the section ends, and once it does, the broadcast is over. That's just the gist of it though, there's so much more that goes into making this the mess that it is. Now nothing in this world is free, so in order to cast votes you need influence. That's the currency of Silent Hill Ascension. You can earn influence through a few different ways. You can earn it by watching the show, watching the backlog of old episodes, and by playing during the Dark Side minigames. Or as you were expecting, you can just buy it. Before getting into any of the problems with the show itself, we gotta talk about the monetization. It may very well be the worst that I've ever seen. So it's pretty simple to start out with. You can buy influence in 3 different packs: Inky, Pinky, and Blinky. But it's Clyde up here where the real problems start to show. The Silent Hill Battle Pass. I'll move over you, we've got a new champion! Okay, so the series is free. You can watch it for no money. So yes, they need to find a way to make money off of it. And battle passes aren't intrinsically bad. Should they be in anything with these letters in this order? No, but it's not impossible to do well. Konami of all companies made one of the best battle passes I've ever seen in Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel. That one not only gives you back everything you have invested, plus a little more, but also trinkets that feel worth it, a pace that's extremely quick and you can knock it out in a couple games, and best of all, gives me an excuse to put my Endymion combos in the discussion. But the Ascension Battle Pass is something else. So you can buy the battle pass for 20 bucks, and it lasts for 100 levels! Look how much you clear the pass just by doing what I would consider a reasonable amount of things to do for a daily app with sub-nick.com level minigames. But now, not buying the battle pass does actually make that last point a bit harder to get across, because I can't show you all of the awful minigames, because the only thing on this app that could constitute gameplay is locked behind the battle pass. Unless you pay for it, you can only play a select group of games every day. So, do I buy the battle pass and show off how bad everything is? Or do you already know what I was gonna do? Of the games I can show you, this is what we're dealing with, folks. Sliding tile puzzles and complete the circuit. If you've been looking for the next Thrillville off-the-rails type game, do I have a URL for you? Don't worry, it doesn't have Silent Hill in it. These minigames are so awful and cheap feeling. I compare them to Nick.com games, but honestly, I think those are head and shoulders above what we got here. This is how their Match 3 game looks. Oh, I'm sorry, is there another way to play a Match 3 game on your phone? Hands down, the most insulting one is the guitar. Silent Hill music is some of the best in the medium, made by the incomparable Akira Yamaoka. But I think I could do it a little better. The whole site is a cheap, poorly designed mess. Where do you think you go to see the previous choices that have been made during the show? The Arcane Library? No, that's where you don't play minigames. Alright, goals? Nope, that's for login bonuses. Okay, it's gotta be in decisions, right? Nope, to find them, you have to go to your player profile and click Moments. It took me way too long to find such a basic feature, and just kind of exemplifies how much of a mess this website is, and the mobile app isn't much better. So, what does that battle pass I mentioned unlock you, aside from the chance to regret spending $20? Well, it nets you over 60,000 influence points over the course of all 100 levels, which will be worth a lot when the bombs drop. It's valued at a little under $60, which, when you say it like that, almost sounds reasonable, a third of what you could have expected it to cost if you went through the packs. But it's when you look and see what a vote actually looks like that you see how useless this really is. Silent Hill Ascension has a leaderboard where you can look at each option during a poll and see how much certain players have put forward in influence towards different options. Remember that if you spend $20 and grind out the entire battle pass, which I don't even think is possible in the average human lifespan, you would have around 60,000 influence points. Let's be even more generous and say you're like me, a sterling monument to a waste of internet bandwidth. If you want to farm out influence, just turn on the backlog in the background and let it play with the sound off. That got me around 5,000 more influence points. This is our baseline, 65,000 influence points. In the most recent poll, Gachapin sunk 96,000 influence points into a single redemption option. A man like Kitsch dumped over 170,000 points into a damnation option. And 361 pumped over 100,000 points into a single redemption option. Those last two might sound like a lot, but it's nothing next to the champion of having money, and 361, who pushed for a damnation option with over 300,000 influence points. There's literally no way for you to keep up unless you dump hundreds of dollars into this game. These bourgeoisie elite like Ant361 control the entire experience. Their influence totals are so astronomical that once they make a choice, you can either reinforce that choice, throw your points away on a meaningless option, or hope that somebody else pumps the option you actually want, then try and back them. This is not a community coming together to try to make a story. It's a few rich people with a strange fascination in bad Silent Hill games, throwing hundreds of dollars to do whatever they want with it. Wait, money can sway an election? And it's really easy to tell which people have dumped money into this game because it has a system where whoever influences a poll the most wins and is forever the person who won that moment. This gives them a little crown next to their name for the rest of the series, and Oh, wouldn't you guess that? A ton of people I just mentioned have the crown. So they've done this before, and they're doing it again. The voting system is neat in concept, but allowing people to buy influence completely negates whatever pittance you get by playing the minigames or watching the backlogs. Whoever puts the most money into the game is the one who wins, and there's nothing a free-to-play user or even somebody buying the Battle Pass can do to influence a thing. It's pointless. But that's not all. On top of influence and emojis, the Battle Pass also unlocks you customization options for your avatar. Yeah, this thing has a character creator, and it's about as good as you'd think. There's nothing that needs to be said, you're just putting PNGs on top of this ugly-as-all-get-out model. How do you make putting a jacket on look so gross? Okay, so why do I need an avatar? I can't make it look like me, this is useless in a police lineup. What's it for? Well, if you realize like I did that your vote doesn't matter, you can use your influence to enter a cameo contest. How it works is that you exchange your points for tickets in a raffle. Every time the broadcast goes live, a random ticket is drawn and a different player's avatar will be dropped into the scene in a different role. Sometimes you'll be a face in the background, other times you'll be a corpse in the dark world, or for special little scamps, you might get to be a central character that influences the plot. Now and forever, Tiziano is an important character to the Silent Hill mythos. So we can gab the day away on the Silent Hill wiki about foreskins, but you can't spare a page for Tiziano. This feature, though, isn't really that appealing, since I can't make my character look remotely appealing. The only chance I have to unlock customization options is to do the Battle Pass or pray that one drops at random when I spend influence. In the worst case scenario, you see a name and weird-looking character pop up and sort of immediately get taken out of the experience as Jizzblaster Dan, the bearded lady, wanders in and starts palling around with the characters, like the director's kid looking for their big acting break. The monetization in this game is truly terrible. It's almost impossible to influence anything when massive whale accounts can afford to sway the vote however they want, with almost no chance for a swing back. You buy and buy and buy, hoping that eventually you'll feel like you're making a difference, only for Ant361 to come in and dash your hopes, just because he has more money than you do. For every Ant361, there's a Paxon001 or Beyond who just burned around $20 just to lose. It's insane how much you can spend just to be a loser. That's assuming we're all being honest about the amount of actual people playing this game. The dark side sections make it pretty clear that there are at least a few bots that fluff up the numbers. I doubt that this many Sybils all get together every night just to fail at Ascension QuickTime events. But all this talk about Ascension and how horrible the monetization is, without a word said about the quality of the actual show. Well, I wanted to talk about the monetization because every cent that this game makes is based on the quality of the show. You're not spending $20 just to make your wallet lighter. You're doing it because you want to influence the show you're watching and interact with it in a meaningful way. Remember that everything we've discussed, all the money, all the time, all the energy is spent to be a part of this show, and this show is god-awful. Silent Hill Ascension starts with a 4th grade art assignment turned therapy referral. He never shows up again for the rest of the show. Then we're taken to the spookiest state of all, Pennsylvania! Dude, they got Philadelphia and Pittsburgh in the same state. What do you think Pyramid Head's gonna do to them? After that is a warning to all Silent Hill fans.
Will it hurt? Yes.
This is Rachel, and she's a member of this cult called the Foundation. It's not the Order from every other Silent Hill game, because this has nothing in common with another Silent Hill game. She's performing a ritual with this girl named Joy who wants to join the cult. Entry involves reciting a prayer and slitting your wrists. And you need a parent's permission. Joy realizes, wait, this is stupid, and tries to leave. But by leaving before the ritual ends, she summons a big monster from... You know what, they never really say. It tongues Joy to death and bang, hard cut to Norway. So the story is split up into 2 stories. There's the one in Pennsylvania and there's the one in Norway. Are these stories related in any way? Even by the characters ending up in the Dark World together? No. These 2 plots are completely unrelated and never intersect. I think only one character ever actually goes to the Dark World, and it's in the Norway story. Oh sure, long after I stopped watching, finally 2 of them met each other, but by this point, it's kinda too late. Speaking of Norway, it brings us to the firecracker of charisma, Carl! James lives in the family farm in the middle of the tundra with his sick wife, and is visited by his daughter and grandson, Astrid and Orson. He comes back to find his old battle axe chewing out their daughter for not raising her son right, which causes them to storm off. It's here you really get a feel for the animation and how lifelike it can be. The graphics themselves are fine, around the standard you'd expect for what looks like a smaller project, but the animations themselves are so bad. Character movements are so rigid and almost feel canned. Like in this scene, they just pressed a button and his head started swaying at random. In emotional scenes like this, body language is super important, and it's just not there. It also shows as few characters moving around a scene as it possibly can. Occasionally one will cross the room, and that always gets a big applause, but most of the time if a character needs to go somewhere, the camera either cuts away from them and then back to them when they get where they want to go, or it just fades to black. Even something like leaving a room is done in jarring cuts that look awful and take you right out of the scene. So James shadow warps upstairs to find his sick wife, who's been stricken with a terminal illness that has made her lash out aggressively at the people she cares about, especially her husband. Then she dies under mysterious circumstances, and that leaves James, as suspect number 1. Yeah, Carl's story reeks of bits and pieces plucked from Silent Hill 2, but done worse with the whole dead wife plot. Sure, he's out of the house doing God knows what while she dies, but wouldn't you guess that Silent Hill 2 has an explanation for that as well? He might just repress the memory and force himself to remember a lie. And if the game starts lying to you about what's happening as you experience it, that means we've officially reached David Cage tier writing. Abandoned ship! So Carl's gotta find a new bed to sleep in tonight, cause this one's full of dead wife, on this latest episode of was this WarioWare? Oh, right. And once again, with no segue, we're thrown back across the pond to Pennsylvania and Rachel. The show bounces back and forth between these two plots over and over without any connective tissue. You'd expect at least one character between them, even just a guy in a hat saying, yes, everything is proceeding as planned. Nah. I'd like a warning if you're gonna put me in Pennsylvania. Rachel is still grappling with the fact that she got Joy killed while trying to kill her, when the rest of her cult buddies comfort her and chew the fat about all sorts of words that don't mean anything to us, like blight and purifier. Guys, if you're not gonna explain it to me, could you at least get Okamoto Matoy up to speed? He looks lost. Rachel goes to talk to her husband Eric about Joy's death, and Eric is really good at saying what everybody in the story already knows but that we don't, which makes him an exposition machine. Go on, say a mundane concept and he'll explain the hell out of it. It turns out Joy had a brother named Toby who hates the Foundation already and isn't gonna sweeten up to them much when they find out about Joy. Rachel tasks Eric with breaking the news since they're friends, and he might not freak out as much if it's coming from an old friend. Hey bro, catch the game last night? What an episode of Wheel of Fortune! Your sister's dead. Stock market! Oh, by the way, the laundromat, one of the central locations that the entirety of Pennsylvania is set in? Store-bought asset. It's gonna take a long time to find Toby though, so we can afford a quick trip back to Norway. Imagine if you were strapped for time and had to watch the SpongeBob movie and RoboCop at the same time. So every time a scene in one ends, you just pause it and play the other. Does that sound disorienting to anybody else? Astrid comes back with Orson in tow as she asks what happened to Mom.
Papa, where's Mama?
I tried. I tried my best.
I think by the second I tried, I'd have gotten the picture. She runs upstairs to go talk to her mom, only to find that she's come down with a sudden case of being killed by Carl. Who could have done this? Orson, check it out, I think there's a fly in her mouth. It takes Astrid about 20 seconds to go from finding out her mother is dead to accusing her dad of killing her. Why would you assume that? I did, but why would you assume that? The scene fades out to the exact same scene as Carl tells Astrid the paramedics are on their way. 3 days, 2 weeks, 8 years might have passed. Doesn't matter. Astrid finds a needle on the ground that Carl says is filled with painkillers. But Astrid points out that her mother didn't take injections. Astrid asks Carl again if he had anything to do with her mother's death, and he can't bring himself to say no. He's a killer, not a liar. The cops show up to investigate, so Carl heads downstairs to talk to them. Fuck, that staircase changed you. We are finally introduced to the main character and best character of them all, Toby. Toby's back in the Pennsylvania story and is the town drunk. He's a slob who's always at the bar. And that's not just because it's one of the 5 locations they modeled for Pennsylvania. Ugh, look at this freak pissing with the door open. Toby heads back to the bar and sees Eric, who lets it slip that his sister got her head twisted off like a bottle cap. And so to the man who just found out his sister is dead, Eric gives him a prayer from the cult he hates, from the cultist he hates, after said cult and cultist just killed his sister. I wouldn't call this an overreaction, I only wish he hit him harder. Also, since Toby's gotten a chance to shine here, it's time to mention the acting. The direction for these scenes is so abysmal that all the acting comes off as wooden and robotic. Part of the reason Toby is so good is that he's the only one with consistently on-point acting. He sounds lively, invested, has good range, the guy can do it all! Damn it! Everyone else, though, feels so uninterested and dead, even in scenes where they're mourning loved ones or experiencing trauma. The voice acting mixed with the animations, though, makes it even worse, since the stilted delivery and dialogue are at 2 completely wrong speeds. So while the person is voiced one way, the body starts to move in another. Scenes like Astrid crying over her mother don't work, cause the whimpering isn't in time with her body motions. Like the motion capture and voiceover were done by 2 different people at 2 different times and they're not on speaking terms. Cut back to Rachel wandering around in the dark looking for someone who knows what's happening when all of a sudden a Silent Hill threatens to break out. And no worries of that. The cult leader Xavier tells Rachel that seeing the monster makes her an extra special cult member, and that she could be the key to salvation. Ah, those classic trustworthy cult leaders, always talking from the heart. They never just tell you what you want to hear. After this, the episode just stops. It doesn't end in a way that makes any sense, it just grinds to a screeching halt and kicks you out into the cold, ready to play a Dark World minigame. And let's really talk about these Dark World sections. So in the Dark World, you'll get a few randomly selected scenes for your character to run through. Sometimes he'll deal with a big fat guy, maybe some dogs, then a weird looking guy with claws, but these are scenes any character can go through. That means you're likely to see these scenes over and over and over again, especially because for the early game, it's Carl almost every single time. For the first 6 broadcasts, Carl is the Dark World character at least 4 times. These scenes aren't let into either. Carl's just in the Dark World now and running around trying to get out. And the start of the next episode isn't him getting out of the Dark World, no, he's fine. These scenes, they just don't matter. And since the character that goes in is picked at random, even if they're barely involved in the episode itself, they're now the focus. Why not instead make it whichever character was the most important or went through a traumatic event in the episode? The reason for that is that there's no such thing as an Eric-centric episode. It's hard to find recordings of a lot of the old Dark World sections because I imagine a lot of people zone out at them, and with these scenes being shared across multiple characters, Rachel and Toby could end up going through the same scene with the only difference being who's in it. Which means these scenes mean nothing! Like I said before, Silent Hill and especially the monsters are based around individual trauma. That's why James sees sexy nurses and giant phallus-wielding executioners that are either getting down or trying to punish him. The twin victims from Silent Hill 4 are like all the other monsters in how they're victims of Walter Sullivan, but specifically a pair of babies he killed. Tons of enemies in Silent Hill 3 are based around sex, because Heather's role is to give birth to the new god. The monsters are integral to understanding what the Dark World means to that person. By having drag-and-drop monsters that don't represent anything, it removes one of the most central and important things about Silent Hill. It's a personal hell. But no, why make sections unique to each character? Wild that Eric and Astrid both have the same trauma that manifests itself into the exact same fat guy with a club hand. Episode 2 starts, Carl no worse for wear after escaping from the Dark World, as the police question him about his wife's death. And apparently people are already shit-talking her after her death. For all I know, she's still up in the bed. The only people that know she's dead are in this room. What a unique way to say you all hate my wife. The police don't believe Carl, and head detective Haugen clearly believes that Carl did it. What gave it away? I mean, who told you? I mean, I'll kill you like I killed my wife. I mean... nuh-uh. But what if instead of following up on any of this, we go back to Pennsylvania? Rachel is making dinner in the kitchen when she starts to get visions of the monsters around her house. She tries to tell Eric what's happening, but decides instead that it's safer to move her family to the Foundation headquarters. This includes herself, Eric, and Faith, their daughter. Eric, having given his spine away as a wedding present, puts up with Rachel's insane devotion to the cult and drags their daughter there despite that being where they murder people. But enough of that, time to get back to Toby! Subscribe to the Toby Fan Magazine. We talk turkey about all things Toby. He's getting drunk in the middle of the woods while listening to voicemails from his dead sister, so at least we know he's taking it well. While he's wandering around, he comes across the Spirit of Joy, who starts telling Toby he has to avenge her by taking out the Foundation and burning it to the ground. Now, here's where one of the issues of the story comes in. Fuck yeah, Toby! The two sides in this fight are a guy whose only remaining family was killed by a cult, and the cult that killed her. Of course I want Toby to win, and I want the cult to go down because Silent Hill and cults have never ended well. The cult, and Rachel especially, have no redeeming factors, so I'm all in on Toby. Now, normally when the episode ends after the Dark World section, you can move on and get back to your life. Not with episode 2. I've always wanted to watch a guilt-free car crash. So Eduardo and Jacob here are two of the high-ranking members at Genvid, the company currently making this embarrassing mess with Silent Hill. This also isn't an uncommon thing. They have pre- and post-game shows for the streams, just another thing that this shares with football. They had to interrupt the stream after the episode concluded because it took a single stream for every single flaw in their format to be exploited. That format, by the way? Oh, well, it's proprietary. See, they didn't make videos or episodes or streams, they make miles. Massive interactive live events, the first of their kind. I did this back in 2014 just to play Pokemon. You've got Bird Jesus and ATV as a standard. So, what were the problems that needed addressing? They were largely of the jizz variety. So the chat function for the game is pretty important. They had super chats that would let your messages pop up on stream, there were emojis and stickers, your messages would be highlighted if you were a top influencer. It was a big deal. It also had zero moderation. A chat room where anybody can post anything for free had a broken moderation system, where there were actual people checking messages, but the queues were so backlogged that by the time they could address problem users, the messages were gone and damage done. You could hop onto the server and see any variety of the N-word. Soft A, hard R, rolling R, truly a slur wonderworld. That's on top of other fantastic messages that people were able to have highlighted and etched into the stone of Silent Hill forever. I want Pyramid Head to appear with big boing boing. Okay, the problem with this one is that they are just stating facts. She pyramid my head till I Ascension gritty skibbity. Wow, I don't want to do this anymore. Wearing my James Sutherland and this wouldn't leave the top of chat for several seconds, guys. Now, I say there was no auto moderation to stop slurs, but that's not all true. There was one slur they would not, nay, could not stand for. Kojima. That's right, Hideo Kojima was about the only word that was banned and you weren't allowed to use in chat. You know which N-word we're talking about, right? Once people found out they didn't want you saying Kojima, it was all that chat would be. And eventually we found the breaking point, leading to this serious headline from a serious news site that reports serious news. Seriously, Silent Hill game disables chat after too many posts about cum. The developers announced in the post-stream talk that their moderation system needed work, and that chat would go to emote only until they found a way to fix all the jizz. It was then offline for the next 23 to 24 episodes. They also discussed moderation and how their idea was they would start big, then scale back what they would actually be able to sustain, which... God, that's such a bad idea! How better to drive people away than with a subpar product that costs a lot? The reason for this awful monetization model is the same reason given time after time. The thing's technically free. They need to make the base thing as free as possible to get as many eyes on the product, promising tens of millions of viewers. Millions! Okay, we all need to acknowledge something. It's not easy. We don't want to hear it, but it's just how it is. Silent Hill is one of the most beloved franchises in all of gaming. People adore this series. It tops so many people's list of favorite series and favorite games, but guys, most people don't know what Silent Hill is. The most successful Silent Hill was the first one on the PlayStation 1, and each entry sold worse than the last. Does that mean they're bad? God Hand sold bad. That is my answer. Overall, the entire Silent Hill franchise has sold around 10 million copies. That's good. That's a good number for a niche psychological horror franchise where there are sadly more bad games than there are good ones. But if you think that 10 million people are going to sign in to watch this, you're out of your mind. The number of actual active Silent Hill fans is probably much smaller than the sales projection. And if you weed out the people who don't want to watch a Silent Hill interactive live stream, it gets worse. Then knock out those who don't want a bad Silent Hill interactive live stream, you're left with nowhere near that amount. Anyone just casually checking in will see how awful the content on display is and dip out not soon after. If you want something closer to what the real stream numbers are, check out the Cameo contest. The most recent one has around 800 entries, and remember that you can buy multiples, so there's an even better chance that it's lower than that number. Take into account the amount of bots going around, and you can comfortably place the player count somewhere in the mid-triple digits. Planning for over 10 million people and pricing it like that, when your real player count doesn't come close if you add 5 zeros to the end, is an awful idea, and one they have to be aware of, but just don't course correct for. So the post-game analysis ends, and it's time for episode 3, right? Well, we could go in-depth episode by episode because, yeah, 23 more rounds of this sounds like a treat, don't it? And if I haven't mentioned it before, every episode is only 5 minutes. We're tackling the rest of the story and characters in broad strokes. And we're going to Pennsylvania first, then covering Norway. One has Hershey Park, the other doesn't. My biases are real. So in Pennsylvania, a whole lot of nothing happens for around 3 episodes. Rachel brings her family to the cult, they leave. Next episode, Rachel takes her family to the cult. The show doesn't just repeat Dark World sections, it repeats whole episodes. This is way more prevalent in the Norway story though, so get those party poppers ready. After sulking a bit about killing Joy, Rachel and her cult get audited by the IRS, which of course stands for Interdimensional Revenue Service. They have to go through a performance review from the actual Ookie Spooky cult and don't understand that maybe in their attempt to summon demons, they might have accidentally summoned a demon. Rachel and the Foundation have to perform a clarity ritual because they fear a withering has arrived to the town. I suppose withering means generally scary stuff, but it's a term that never really gets explained here or in any Silent Hill anything. It also introduces a feature this show loves, which is having the end of a segment being a character listing out 3 options that will be a vote later. Back with Toby, he's drinking his dead sister's sorrows away when he gets a drinkin' buddy. Red Penguin 20. Ah, what a pretty name. Is it Italian? This is a fan insert character, but they also get to be the first voice of reason in the entire show. They're an ex-Foundation member who tells Toby all about the abuse and anguish they put her through, and helps Toby formulate a plan to break in and cause some trouble. An integral character to the plot will always be named Red Penguin 20, and we can't change that. Toby goes to find Eric to get more information and bumps into him at the laundromat. The happening place to be. A strong tone of voice gets Eric to spill the beans, and now Toby's off to firebomb the ritual, yeah! Rachel who? Toby's a fucking pyromancer! Rachel passes out at the sheer audacity of it as the whole room, Toby included, gets sent to the dark world. A monster leaps out to attack him and... well, I guess a creative character jumped in the way, cause he's actually fine. Everybody except Eric saw the monster, which, if you needed any more proof that you could replace Eric with a lamp, there you go. Toby gets kicked out for rudely firebombing a room full of people, and now the cult is on high alert. That Toby is the only cool guy in town. We gotta recruit him. Head of the Foundation, Xavier, is dead set on having Toby join the cult, and sends Rachel to go find him. If you kill somebody's sister, you can make them listen. Toby's busy though, because from episode 10 onwards, they really start hammering home the mill. Something happened at the mill that caused Toby to start drinking, which led him to ignore his sister, which led to her getting killed. And somehow, Rachel is involved. What happened? Oh, just wait until episode 26. On his way out, Toby falls over backwards into Silent Hill, where he's confronted by Joy as a ghost, who demands that he start killing Foundation members for letting her be killed. At least that's what I think she's trying to get across. While she's busy being busy, Rachel sends her whipped wimp of a husband to go find Toby, for the third time in less than 12 streams. Oh, it's been 4 episodes. Hey, pussy, go find Toby! Toby's at laundromat, the bar. Damn it! Which is where Eric finds him. Eric then recites word for word the entire script Rachel gave him to read to his friend, and surprisingly, it's not enough, and Toby sees through it in an instant. Toby calls Eric out for being a wimp, a bad friend, and using his kid to justify his wife being in a cult that murders people. Eric leaves because he doesn't want Toby to hit him again. Then the exact same scene happens in the laundromat. Yeah! About a half a dozen episodes after getting the mission to find Toby, Rachel finally gets the let out. Her only lead is accidentally stumbling into Joy's old drug dealer, who just so happens to know where Toby is. Yeah, he was so angry at me for selling his little sister black tar heroin, he didn't even notice I chipped him. He'll help Rachel out, but only if he gives her a vial full of her blood. What? Rachel whips out the knife she keeps on hand in case more Toby sisters need murdering, and gives the guy a fill-up. Not really necessary, Toby was where you'd expect him to be. He also reacts how you'd expect, which is completely justified. Before even trying to say she's sorry, she's already trying to recruit him. Toby chews her out for being horrible, and her only response is to say she'll say whatever Toby wants to hear. Rachel, most cult leaders are a lot more subtle about it. She never apologizes in this scene, and Toby is totally justified for how he reacts. He doesn't want a thing to do with her or the cult that killed his sister. He joins by the end of the episode. Yep, Joy's ghost comes to him and says it'd be the best way to kill as many of them as possible, so Toby just fills out an application and becomes a full-blown cult member. I feel like we missed a wrist slitting. Rachel's all down in the dumps that Toby wouldn't trade friendship rings after she did such a good job not apologizing, and cheers herself up with a good old-fashioned round of shitting on Eric. He just lives in my house and gave me a child. Why does he need to know what demons I'm summoning? By this point, even Rachel's kid is talking more sense than her, saying that she's a screaming psychopath that stomps and pouts at Eric whenever she doesn't get her way. Yeah, my daughter really wears the pants in the family.
Play with me! That's it. Go upstairs to your room. You're in timeout, young lady. No!
Faith!
Say you're sorry.
This kid's going places. Toby joins the town book club and is tasked with going back to the old steel mill. Only 5 more episodes until he explains what happened. Xavier calls what he brings back from the mill a blight fetish. Ew. And explains that he can make everything right, punish Rachel like she deserves, and fix his reputation in the town. All he's gotta do is kill himself. kill me-self? While he's contemplating what to do, a couple guys come up and start hitting him with a stick. Toby's life sucks. Rachel tells Eric, a grown man, he's not allowed to hang out with Toby anymore. No more sleepovers, no more play dates, you're done. Delete his phone number. You'd never guess that this is finally what gets Eric to stand up for himself. You wouldn't guess because it doesn't happen. He meets Toby at the bar again and tells him he can't play stickball with him after class anymore, and stays out of punching range for the whole scene. Frame 1, Toby figures out that this is another thing that Rachel has sent him to say, and it gets the expected result. No, not a punch, I don't get what I want. So, just to throw some salt on those wounds, they're gonna kill Toby at the steel mill. Because fuck him. And they're gonna let Rachel do it. Because double fuck him.
Something is wrong.
At the very least, Toby gets to go out on a good line.
We have to end the withering.
Toby, I can't.
Yes, you can.
Toby,
Don't stop being a cold-hearted bitch on me now.
And with that, Silent Hill Ascension finally managed to kill its first major character. And what a choice! We will now be renaming Silent Hill to Toby-topia in his memory. And the Pennsylvania story thus far ends there, and I have zero interest in figuring out what happens next. Toby was the only character moving the plot forward. Rachel just wants to do vague cult stuff, and a scene with Eric is a scene wasted, so the story has lost all momentum. If Toby is the source for all the withering and bad stuff, job done, scariness over, no more need for a Pennsylvania story. If Toby isn't the source, they just killed him for no reason, and this is the dumbest cult ever since they managed to axe off an entire bloodline by accident. How are we supposed to be interested in any part of the cult storyline if everything they do is wrong? That leaves us with Rachel and Eric as the only main characters left in this part of the story, and they're awful. Rachel is super unlikable and either whimpering and afraid or yelling at Eric. And Eric's barely a character. All the plot threads that could have been interesting were tied to Toby. We'll never find out his sister's ghost if it was real or just in his head, or what happened in the steel mill, because why would we care about Toby? He's dead! The Pennsylvania storyline housed the show's single bright spot, and before he could even finish his story, they snuffed it out. If Eric wants to find his missing daughter, he has to fuck everyone in the Foundation. This is not a joke. Things take time, and in the time this show has been going on, the story has developed to a point that Eric needs to go to a Silent Hill-themed orgy, record-shattering day, really, if he wants the clarity to find his daughter. I don't know if anyone involved in this should ever be allowed to write ever again. But that's just one half. What about Norway? Am I going to waste my time on this? Norway is so boring. It has been 25 episodes and the story has not advanced a second. There are a total of 4 scenes in Norway. It's either Carl walking around his farm looking sad, Astrid being a bad mom, people drinking booze at an igloo, or an argument. These 4 scenes happened over and over and over, and they never impact the next. Astrid vows to never see her father again at least 4 times, and sometimes gets over it in the same scene. So instead of hogging all the oxygen it would take to explain what happened, here's a highlight reel of things to save you the trouble. There's a plot point early on that Astrid thinks Carl killed her mother with morphine. And the next couple of episodes are her going to various places, telling people her mom doesn't take morphine, and then walking away. In between those moments, she's losing her kid and taking quick dips into something that could resemble Silent Hill. Eventually, though, she finds out that her mother's death had nothing to do with morphine. Well, yeah, Carl used a pillow. He didn't smother her to death with morphine. And the next episode starts with her finding morphine pills in her aunt's bag, and she starts the whole hunt over again. In one episode, to calm her son down, Mother of the Year Astrid thinks the best thing to do is to have him help pick out a plot to bury his grandmother. Hey, sweetums, wanna go find a hole to dump your grandma in? Yeah! Speaking of Ingrid, for a few episodes, her body is straight up stolen out of the morgue and desecrated. Nobody ever asks who, what, when, where, why, or how, and, well, if the characters aren't interested, why should I be? In between bouts of wife murder, Carl is also the surrogate father to Ava, a random vagrant child who just pops into his house from time to time. He trusts her enough to let her watch Orson, teach her how to shoot, watch a man die together, and she...
I found a dead rabbit once. It was gutted head to toe. I didn't even recognize it, just matted fur and flesh.
shouldn't be trusted with a gun. Carl's family is also hated by the entire rest of the town for a great reason. He's Carl. Midway through the season, they introduce Ingrid's sister so that Carl could have another potential wife to kill. And finally, is the Berry Man.
Don't shoot! Please!
What are you doing out here? You could have been killed.
I'm just foraging for wild berries. I swear. I stumbled on a great patch of rowan berries over here.
Have you seen anything unusual out here?
Now that you mention it, I have seen some strange things out in these woods. I've been rooting for berries and other things for several seasons now. I like to make jams. I sell them in town. I could bring you some. Maybe you and your family would like that.
You should keep moving. You're on my property.
Well, I am sorry for that. I guess I'll just be on my way then.
Clearly, he was so popular, the devs had to shoot him to keep him from getting his own DS spin-off. Silent Hill Ascension has failed in a way things haven't been able to fail in yet. If it was a game, it'd be the worst Silent Hill game. If it was a movie, it'd be the worst Silent Hill movie. But it's neither of those, it's some brand new third thing. And in that field, it stands alone. It reigns supreme as the worst Silent Hill thing ever. And yet I was endlessly fascinated by it. Every misstep, every failure, every foreseeable catastrophe rushed headlong into with no thought whatsoever that I'm baffled to watch. But also, and this has to be said with hindsight now that the joke's gotten old and the show is still going, after the YouTube channel I watched them on got hacked and taken down, not pointing blame even though it'd be really funny, my interest absolutely cratered. It turns out the same joke told over and over again gets boring, Balan Wonderworld, and the show for the past 10 or so episodes has just been characters walking in circles and accomplishing nothing. The worst parts of Norway have infected the entire show, and ever since Toby died, there really isn't anybody in the Pennsylvania story with a goal or something they're trying to accomplish. So it's stagnated to the point that even me, who found the show so funny at first, am just bored. Silent Hill Ascension is boring. Silent Hill isn't boring. So by that property, Silent Hill Ascension isn't Silent Hill.